You know, boss, I've been having this crazy thought lately that just won't leave my head.
Oh? Tell me about it, Claire. Sometimes the most persistent thoughts lead to the most fascinating conversations.
Well, I was watching the news, and there's all this talk about walls being built, borders being tightened, and people fighting over who belongs where. And then I thought, what if tomorrow all the borders in the world just disappeared? Like, completely vanished. Would that be paradise or chaos?
Ah, the eternal question of a borderless world. That's not just a random thought, Claire. It's one of humanity's most profound puzzles.
But seriously, boss, is it even possible? I mean, why do we need boundaries in the first place?
Well, to understand whether a world without borders is possible, we first need to ask ourselves, why do humans create boundaries at all? Think about it. Even children naturally mark their territory in a playground. There's something deeply psychological about our need to define us and them.
That's true. I remember being a kid and having my side of the room with my sister. But surely that's different from national borders, right?
More connected than you might think. You see, our brains are actually wired for what psychologists call tribalism. It's not just a quirky human behavior, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism. For most of human history, belonging to a group meant the difference between life and death.
So you're saying we're naturally tribal creatures?
Exactly. When our ancestors roamed the African savanna thousands of years ago, those who could quickly identify their group members and distinguish them from potential threats had better survival rates. The brain literally rewards us with feel-good chemicals when we're with our people, and triggers stress responses when we encounter outsiders.
That's fascinating, and kind of depressing. Are we doomed to always see the world as us versus them?
Not necessarily. Here's where it gets interesting. While the tribal instinct is hardwired, what defines our tribe is remarkably flexible. Think about it. You might feel tribal loyalty to your hometown football team, your university, your profession, or even fans of the same TV show. The boundaries of our tribes can expand and contract.
So in theory, we could expand our tribal identity to include all of humanity?
Precisely. But let's step back and look at how we got to today's system of nation-states in the first place. The world hasn't always been divided into countries with clear borders. For most of history, political boundaries were fluid, overlapping, and constantly changing.
Really? I always assumed countries were just there.
Not at all. The modern nation-state system actually started with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Picture this. Europe had just endured the devastating 30 Years' War. A conflict so brutal, it killed about 8 million people, roughly a third of Germany's population.
My God, what was the war about?
Officially, it was about religion, Catholics versus Protestants. But really, it was about power. Who would dominate Europe? France? Austria? Sweden jumped in, then Spain. It was a mess of shifting alliances, where Protestant and Catholic countries sometimes fought on the same side.
So how did the Peace of Westphalia change everything?
It established something revolutionary, the principle that each state has exclusive sovereignty over its territory. Before this, you had overlapping authorities: the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope, local princes, trading companies. The Westphalian system said, your country, your rules. Stay out of each other's internal affairs.
That actually sounds reasonable. What's wrong with that?
Well, nothing inherently. But here's the fascinating part. Many historians now call the traditional story of Westphalia a myth. The actual treaties don't contain most of the principles we associate with them. The modern nation-state system evolved much more gradually and wasn't really solidified until the 19th and 20th centuries.
So we created this system relatively recently in human history.
Exactly. And if we created it, we can change it. But let's think about what borders actually do for us. They're not just lines on a map. They create identity, provide security, enable governance, and allow for different experiments in how societies organize themselves.
I never thought about borders as enabling experimentation.
Think about it. Right now, you can have Denmark's social democracy coexisting with Singapore's capitalist efficiency, or Sweden's environmental policies alongside America's entrepreneurial culture. Borders allow for what economists call policy laboratories.
But they also keep people apart, right? Like, I can't just decide to move to Denmark tomorrow because I like their healthcare system.
True, and that touches on one of the biggest debates in globalization. On one hand, we've seen unprecedented integration. Trade, technology, and ideas flow more freely than ever. The European Union created something close to a borderless zone for its citizens. But on the other hand,
People are building more walls than ever.
exactly, it's paradoxical. Just as technology was making borders more porous, we've seen a global backlash. Brexit, Trump's wall proposals, rising nationalism from Brazil to Hungary to India. Why do you think that is?
Maybe people feel overwhelmed by too much change too fast.
That's a brilliant insight. When borders become too permeable too quickly, it can trigger that ancient tribal anxiety we talked about. People feel their identity is under threat. They don't know who their tribe is anymore.
So it's like a psychological reaction to globalization?
Precisely. And here's what's really interesting about globalization. It's created both unprecedented connection and unprecedented isolation. You can video chat with someone in Tokyo while feeling disconnected from your next-door neighbor.
That's so true. I have online friends I feel closer to than people I see every day.
Which brings us to one of the most fascinating developments of our time: digital citizenship. Imagine if your primary loyalty wasn't to the country where you were born, but to an online community that shares your values.
Like what, virtual countries?
Exactly. Barbados has already opened a virtual embassy in a digital world called Decentraland. Palau is offering digital residency to over 300,000 applicants. Estonia's e-residency program lets you become a digital citizen without ever setting foot in the country.
Wait, that's actually happening? I thought you were talking hypothetically.
Oh no, this is very real. We're witnessing the birth of what some call digital nations, communities organized around shared interests, values, or goals rather than geography. Decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, are experimenting with governance models that bypass traditional nation-states entirely.
How does that even work?
Picture this. Instead of being governed by politicians you might never meet, you're part of a global community where everyone who contributes gets a say in decisions. Using blockchain technology, these communities can manage resources, make collective decisions, and even issue their own currencies, all without a traditional government.
That sounds amazing, but also kind of scary. Who enforces the rules?
That's the key innovation. Instead of human enforcers, you have smart contracts that automatically execute agreements. No police, no courts, no jails, just code that can't be corrupted or biased.
But what about people who break the rules in the physical world?
And there's the limitation. These digital nations work great for digital activities, managing virtual assets, coordinating online projects, governing virtual spaces. But they can't arrest anyone or protect physical borders.
So we might end up with dual citizenship, physical and digital.
That's one possibility. Imagine being a citizen of France for physical matters, taxes, healthcare, physical security, but a citizen of a global climate action DAO for environmental decisions. Your digital citizenship might even be more important to your daily life than your physical one.
This is making my head spin. But let's get practical for a minute. If we really did eliminate all physical borders tomorrow, what would actually happen?
Well, let's think through the immediate consequences. First, you'd have massive population movements. People would migrate from poorer to richer areas, from areas with bad governance to areas with good governance.
That would be chaos, wouldn't it?
Potentially. But here's an interesting fact. Only about 3% of the world's population currently lives outside their birth country. Even if that number doubled or tripled, we're still talking about a minority of people actually moving.
Really? I would have guessed it was much higher.
Most people are surprisingly attached to their homeland, even when economic opportunities exist elsewhere. But the places that did experience large migrations would face enormous challenges: housing, employment, social services, cultural integration.
What about the economic effects?
This is where economists disagree passionately. Free market economists argue that open borders would lead to massive wealth creation. People could work where they're most productive, companies could access global talent, innovation would accelerate.
That sounds positive.
It could be, Some estimates suggest global GDP could increase by 50 to 150% with open borders. But others worry about wage depression in rich countries and brain drain from poor countries. The benefits might be enormous overall, but very unevenly distributed.
So some people would win big and others would lose big?
Exactly, and that's always been the challenge with globalization. Now let's think about governance. How do you make decisions for 7 billion people with vastly different cultures, values, and interests?
I have no idea. Democracy is already messy with just one country.
Right. Imagine trying to agree on global laws about everything from marriage to taxation to environmental protection. What's considered normal in one culture might be abhorrent in another.
But don't we already have some global governance? Like the United Nations?
We do, but it's quite limited. The UN can make recommendations and coordinate responses to crises, but it can't really enforce much. And look how difficult it is to get agreement on issues like climate change, even when the stakes are existential.
So maybe we need smaller, more flexible forms of governance?
That's a fascinating idea. Instead of one global government, maybe we'd have multiple overlapping jurisdictions. Like, you might be governed by different authorities for different aspects of your life. A global climate authority for environmental issues, a regional authority for trade, a local authority for community matters.
That actually sounds more realistic than one world government.
It does, and in many ways, that's already happening. You're governed by your city council, your state government, your national government, and international agreements your country has signed. The borders between these authorities are already getting blurrier.
But boss, let's talk about identity for a minute. If borders disappeared, what would happen to our sense of who we are?
Now you're touching on something profound. Our identities are deeply tied to place, aren't they? I'm American, I'm French, I'm Nigerian. But here's a thought experiment. How would you describe yourself if countries didn't exist?
Let me think. I guess I'd say I'm a curious person who loves learning, someone who cares about justice, a ginger ale enthusiast.
Exactly. You'd probably define yourself by your values, interests, relationships, and experiences rather than your geography. And in many ways, that might be more authentic to who you really are.
But wouldn't we lose something important, like cultural diversity?
That's a crucial concern. Borders do help preserve distinct cultures. French wine culture, Japanese craftsmanship traditions, Brazilian music. These developed partly because of geographical separation. In a borderless world, would everything just become a bland global culture?
That would be terrible. I love how different places have different flavors, literally and figuratively.
But here's an interesting counterpoint. Some of the most vibrant cultural innovations happen when different traditions mix. Jazz came from African and European musical traditions blending in America. Fusion cuisine combines culinary traditions from different countries. The internet has created new global cultures while also helping preserve local traditions.
So maybe borders aren't necessary for cultural diversity?
Perhaps not. Look at a place like New York City, incredibly diverse culturally but all within one political jurisdiction. Or consider how online communities preserve and celebrate cultural traditions across national boundaries.
Okay, but what about security? Borders help keep out bad people, right?
That's the traditional argument, but it's complicated. Most terrorism and crime is actually domestic, committed by citizens against other citizens. The 9/11 attackers all entered the US legally. Meanwhile, border restrictions often hurt innocent people more than criminals.
How so?
Well, criminals and terrorists have resources to circumvent border controls, fake documents, smuggling networks, corruption. But refugees fleeing violence or workers seeking better opportunities often can't access these illegal channels, so they suffer most from border restrictions.
I never thought about it that way.
Plus, in a truly borderless world, you wouldn't have the same kinds of international conflicts that create security threats in the first place. Hard to have international terrorism when there are no international borders to cross or international grievances to exploit.
But wouldn't you have other kinds of conflicts?
Absolutely. Human conflict wouldn't disappear. It would just take different forms. Instead of countries fighting countries, you might have economic classes fighting each other, or different cultural groups, or ideological movements.
So we'd trade one set of problems for another?
Potentially. though some argue those conflicts might be less destructive than nation-state warfare. Civil wars within countries are terrible, but world wars between countries have been historically catastrophic.
This is making me think, are there any places that have actually tried eliminating borders?
Great question. The European Union is probably the closest large-scale experiment. Citizens of EU countries can live, work, and travel freely within most of the bloc. And by many measures, it's been successful. Increased trade, reduced conflict, cultural exchange.
But Brexit happened.
Exactly. And that illustrates both the benefits and the backlash. Many people felt the EU had gone too far too fast, that they were losing control over their own destiny. The economic benefits were real, but unevenly distributed.
So even when it works economically, it can fail politically?
That's a key insight. Economic integration and political integration are different things. People might accept economic interdependence while rejecting political unification.
What about technology? Is it making borders more or less relevant?
Both, paradoxically. On one hand, digital technology makes physical borders almost meaningless for information, ideas, and many services. You can work for a company on another continent, learn from teachers anywhere in the world, or fall in love with someone you've never met in person.
True. The internet feels pretty borderless.
But here's the paradox. The same technologies that connect us globally also enable new forms of digital borders. Countries block websites, create national firewalls, and spy on digital communications. China's Great Firewall is essentially a digital border wall.
And social media can create echo chambers that are like intellectual borders.
Brilliant observation. We might live in a physically borderless world but still be mentally segregated into information tribes that never interact with each other.
That's almost worse than physical borders.
In some ways, yes. Physical borders are at least visible and negotiable. Digital echo chambers can be invisible and self-reinforcing. You might think you're getting diverse global perspectives when you're actually getting a very narrow slice of global opinion.
So technology isn't automatically solving the border problem?
Not automatically, no. Like any tool, technology amplifies human tendencies, both cooperative and tribal. The same internet that enables global collaboration also enables global misinformation and polarization.
Okay, let me ask you something more personal, boss. Where do you feel like you belong?
That's a beautiful question, Claire. I've lived in many places, and I've come to think that belonging isn't really about geography, it's about connection. I belong wherever I can be authentically myself, while contributing something valuable to others.
That's a very global citizen perspective.
Perhaps. But I also understand the appeal of rootedness, of having a place that shaped you and that you help shape in return. There's something powerful about saying, this is my home, these are my people, this is my responsibility.
So maybe the question isn't whether borders should exist, but how permeable they should be.
Now you're thinking like a diplomat. Perhaps the future isn't completely borderless, but rather border flexible. Borders that expand and contract based on circumstances, that allow for multiple forms of membership, that recognize our complex multi-layered identities.
What would that look like practically?
Well, imagine having different types of citizenship or membership. Maybe you're a cultural citizen of your hometown, an economic citizen of a trade zone, a political citizen of a democratic federation, and a global citizen for environmental issues.
That's complex. But it sounds more realistic than either rigid borders or no borders at all.
And it reflects how many people already live. Think about someone who works for a multinational corporation, supports international charities, follows global news, but still feels rooted in their local community.
Speaking of communities, what about the people who are already marginalized by current borders, like immigrants and refugees?
That's one of the most compelling arguments for border reform. Current border systems often trap people in poverty or violence, while privileging others based on the accident of birth. A person born in Somalia faces vastly different life prospects than someone born in Sweden, through no choice of their own.
That does seem fundamentally unfair.
And yet, completely open borders might create new forms of unfairness. If everyone could move freely, would that help the poorest people, or would it mainly benefit those with the resources to move? Would it leave behind the most vulnerable?
I hadn't thought about that. Moving requires money and skills.
Exactly. The people most in need of escape from poverty or persecution are often least able to migrate. Meanwhile, the most educated and entrepreneurial people, who their home countries need most, are most able to leave.
So open borders might hurt the countries that need development most?
It's possible. Although others argue that immigrants send money home and return with new skills and connections. The evidence is mixed, and probably depends on the specific circumstances.
This is so complicated. Every solution seems to create new problems.
Welcome to Policy Analysis, Claire. But here's what I find hopeful. We're asking better questions. Instead of, should we have borders or not, we're asking what kinds of borders, for what purposes, with what exceptions.
And maybe the answer is different for different places and different times?
Precisely. What works for the European Union might not work for sub-Saharan Africa. What worked in the 20th century might not work in the 21st century. We need adaptive systems, not rigid ideologies.
But boss, let me ask you about something that really worries me. In a world where borders matter less, would people still care about each other? Like, would we help strangers?
That touches on one of the deepest questions in human psychology. We know that people are most generous toward their in-group, family, friends, tribe, nation. If we expand our sense of community to include everyone, do we end up caring about no one in particular?
Exactly. It's like that saying, a friend to all is a friend to none.
But here's a different perspective. Maybe caring more broadly doesn't mean caring less deeply. Think about doctors who work for organizations like Doctors Without Borders. They've expanded their sense of professional obligation to include all of humanity. But that makes their work more meaningful, not less.
That's true, and there are lots of global charities and movements.
Climate activists care about the whole planet. Human rights advocates work for strangers they'll never meet. Some people seem capable of expanding their circle of concern without losing their capacity for deep relationships.
But is that scalable? Can 7 billion people really care about each other?
Maybe not directly, but perhaps through institutions and systems. We don't need everyone to personally love everyone else. We need systems that protect everyone's basic dignity and opportunity.
Like having global basic human rights even if we don't have global government?
Exactly. And in fact, that's already emerging. The International Criminal Court prosecutes war crimes regardless of nationality. The World Health Organization coordinates pandemic responses. International rescue operations help disaster victims everywhere.
So we're already living in a partially borderless world for some things?
Yes, and that suggests a possible path forward: selective integration. Maybe we have open borders for refugees and students, regulated borders for workers, and national borders for political decisions.
Or open borders for emergencies and global challenges, but local control for daily governance.
Now you're designing a new world order, Claire. And what I love about your approach is that it's pragmatic rather than ideological. You're asking what works, rather than what's pure.
Well, I'm trying to imagine a world I'd actually want to live in, not just one that sounds good in theory.
And what kind of world is that?
I guess a world where I could travel freely and meet people from everywhere, where we could work together on big problems like climate change, where nobody's trapped by the accident of where they were born, but where I could still have a hometown that feels like home, where communities could preserve what makes them special.
That's a beautiful vision. And you know what? It's not entirely utopian. We have pieces of it already: international exchange programs, global research collaborations, dual citizenship, sister city relationships, multinational companies with local offices.
So maybe the question isn't whether to build a borderless world from scratch, but how to connect the pieces we already have.
Brilliantly put. Evolution rather than revolution. Work with human nature rather than against it. Build bridges while respecting the human need for roots.
But boss, I have to ask, do you think this will actually happen in my lifetime?
Some of it is happening already, Claire. The question is whether it happens thoughtfully or chaotically, whether it's driven by crisis or by choice. Climate change, pandemics, economic disruption, all of these are forcing more global cooperation whether we want it or not.
So we might not get to choose whether borders matter less. We might just have to choose how to manage it.
That's a very astute observation. The forces of globalization, technology, climate, economics are bigger than any one country's border policies. The question is whether we guide those forces or let them overwhelm us.
That's both exciting and terrifying.
The best futures usually are, but here's what gives me hope: conversations like this one. When people think seriously about these questions, when they consider multiple perspectives and complex trade-offs, they usually find creative solutions.
You really think so?
I do. Think about how much the world has changed in just the last generation. When I was young, the idea of European integration seemed impossible. Too many historical enemies, too many different languages and currencies, yet here we are.
And nobody could have predicted the internet would create global communities of people who've never met in person.
Exactly. The future has a way of surprising us with solutions we never imagined. Maybe the answer to borders isn't what any of us expect.
Like what?
Well, what if advances in virtual reality make physical location less important? What if artificial intelligence enables new forms of governance that work across cultural boundaries? What if climate change forces such massive cooperation that national sovereignty becomes secondary?
Or what if people just get tired of conflict and decide to try something different?
Now there's an optimistic thought, and history does have examples of that. After World War II, Europeans said never again, and started building institutions for peace. Maybe future generations will look at our current border conflicts and decide to try a different approach.
Do you think they'll judge us harshly for how we handle these issues?
Probably. Every generation judges their predecessors. But I hope they'll also recognize that we were grappling with genuinely difficult questions without easy answers.
What do you think is the most important thing for our generation to get right?
I think it's what you've been doing tonight, Claire. Holding complexity, resisting simple answers, staying curious about people who are different from you, thinking both globally and locally.
You make it sound so manageable.
The thinking part is manageable. The acting part, well, that's where it gets interesting. But here's what I've learned in my years behind this bar. Most people, given the chance to really think through these issues, come to surprisingly similar conclusions.
What do you mean?
They want safety for their families, opportunity for their children, respect for their values, and hope for the future. Those desires cross all borders: national, cultural, ideological. If we can design systems that honor those universal human needs, we might find that borders matter less than we think.
That's beautiful, boss. But it's also hard to believe sometimes when I see all the conflict in the world.
I understand. But remember, conflict makes news precisely because it's unusual. Most human interactions, even across differences, are peaceful and cooperative. Most people, most of the time, are just trying to live their lives and care for their loved ones.
So maybe the problem isn't that people are naturally tribal and hostile, but that our systems amplify the worst instead of the best in human nature?
Now you're thinking like a social scientist. Yes, I think our current border systems often bring out fear and competition rather than curiosity and cooperation. But that doesn't mean all border systems would have that effect.
So the goal isn't to eliminate all boundaries, but to design better boundaries?
Exactly. Boundaries that protect without isolating, that preserve diversity without preventing cooperation, that honor local identity while enabling global citizenship.
Boss, I have one more question that's been bothering me. If borders become more flexible or less important, what happens to democracy? Can you have democratic governance without a clearly defined demos, a people?
That's perhaps the most profound question you've asked tonight, Claire. Democracy does seem to require some sense of we the people, but who counts as the people has always been contested and has expanded over time.
How so?
Well, American democracy originally included only white male property owners. Gradually it expanded to include all men, then women, then racial minorities. The boundary of the people kept expanding while maintaining democratic governance.
So maybe it could expand globally?
In theory, yes. But there are practical challenges. How do you have meaningful democratic participation among billions of people, with vastly different languages, educations, and information sources?
That does seem impossible.
At a direct level, yes. But maybe democracy could work at multiple scales simultaneously. Local democracy for local issues, regional democracy for regional issues, global democracy for global issues.
Like a nested system?
Exactly. You might vote for your neighborhood council, your city mayor, your regional governor, and your representatives to global climate governance. Each level handles the issues most appropriate to that scale.
That could work, though it would be complicated to coordinate.
Complicated, yes. But we already coordinate systems across multiple levels. Think about how your smartphone works seamlessly across local cell towers, national telecom networks, and global internet infrastructure.
That's a good analogy. So maybe governance could become more like the internet, distributed but interconnected?
Precisely. No single point of control, but common protocols that allow everything to work together. Local autonomy within global frameworks.
Boss, this conversation has been incredible, but I have to ask, what should I do with all these ideas? They're too big for just one person.
Start small, Claire. You can't redesign the global order single-handedly, but you can live as if borders matter less than they currently do. Learn about other cultures. Support organizations that work across boundaries. Vote for leaders who think globally. Build relationships with people unlike yourself.
So be the change I want to see in the world.
Exactly. And remember, every major change in human organization started with people having conversations like this one. Someone had to imagine the abolition of slavery before it could be abolished. Someone had to envision women's suffrage before women could vote.
So our conversation tonight is part of a larger conversation happening all over the world?
I believe so. In coffee shops and classrooms, in online forums and family dinners, people are grappling with these same questions. What does it mean to be human in a globally connected world? How do we balance our need for roots with our need for wings?
That gives me hope, but also makes me feel responsible to keep thinking about these things.
Good. Staying curious about the big questions is one of the most important things any of us can do. Not because you'll find final answers, but because the quality of your questions shapes the quality of your life.
And maybe the quality of our collective future?
I think so, Claire. The world your generation creates will depend largely on the questions you ask and the stories you tell about what's possible.
No pressure, right?
Ha! Think of it as the most interesting adventure in human history. You get to help write the next chapter of our species' story. Not many generations get to say that.
When you put it that way, it does sound pretty exciting. Terrifying, but exciting.
The best adventures usually are. And remember, you're not doing it alone. You're part of a global community of people who care about these questions, who want to build something better.
A tribe of people trying to expand the tribe?
Beautiful way to put it. A community dedicated to expanding community. A group identity based on rejecting narrow group identity.
That's paradoxical, but it somehow makes sense.
The most interesting truths often are paradoxical. Like how the most patriotic thing might be to question your country's borders, or how the most human thing might be to expand your definition of humanity.
Boss, I think you've given me enough to think about for the next decade.
Good, but remember, thinking is just the beginning. The real adventure is in living these ideas, testing them against reality, refining them through experience.
And sharing them with other people who are asking the same questions?
Exactly. The future of borders and the future of humanity will be written through countless conversations like this one. Keep asking questions, Claire. Keep imagining what's possible.
I will, boss. Thank you for helping me think through all this. I feel like I understand the world a little better, and myself too.
That's all any of us can ask for. A little more understanding, a little more connection, a little more hope for what we might build together.
Here's to a world with better boundaries and bigger possibilities.
I'll drink to that, Claire, to the courage to imagine a different future, and the wisdom to build it thoughtfully.
Boss, before I go, there's one more thing that's been nagging at me. You've talked about all these possibilities, but what about the people who are already suffering because of current border systems? Can we really ask them to wait while we figure out better solutions?
That's the most morally urgent question you could ask, Claire. Right now, as we speak, there are people dying trying to cross borders, children separated from families, brilliant minds trapped in poverty because of the accident of their birthplace.
It makes all our philosophical discussion feel a bit privileged, doesn't it?
It does, and that tension is important to acknowledge. But here's what I've learned. The urgent and the important aren't always the same thing. We need both immediate humanitarian responses and long-term systemic thinking.
What do you mean?
Well, we can support refugee resettlement programs, advocate for family reunification policies, and donate to organizations providing immediate aid. Those are urgent responses to current suffering. But we also need to think about systems that would prevent those crises in the first place.
Like addressing the root causes of why people feel they need to flee their homes?
Exactly. Poverty, corruption, violence, climate change, lack of opportunity. These are often what drive mass migration. If we could address those underlying issues, we might need fewer refugees and migrants in the first place.
But that takes generations, and people are suffering now.
Which is why we need both approaches simultaneously. It's like being a doctor. You treat the immediate symptoms to save the patient's life, but you also work on prevention to avoid future emergencies.
That makes sense. But boss, let me ask you something difficult. Do rich countries have an obligation to open their borders to people from poor countries? And if so, how much obligation?
Now you're wrestling with one of the deepest questions in moral philosophy. Different ethical frameworks give very different answers. A utilitarian might say yes. If opening borders would increase overall human happiness and reduce suffering, then we're morally obligated to do it.
But that seems to ignore the concerns of people already living in rich countries.
Exactly the counter-argument. A communitarian philosopher might say we have special obligations to our fellow citizens that we don't have to strangers. It's like the difference between your responsibility to your family versus your responsibility to humanity in general.
So there's no clear moral answer?
Well, there are clear answers within different moral frameworks, but the frameworks themselves are contested. However, I think most people would agree on some basic principles. We shouldn't let people die when we could easily save them, and we should take some responsibility for problems we've helped create.
What do you mean by problems we've helped create?
Climate change is a big example. Rich countries produced most of the historical emissions that are now displacing people from small island nations and drought-prone regions. Don't those rich countries bear some responsibility for the resulting migration?
That seems fair. But what about economic migrants, people who just want better opportunities?
That's more complicated. On one hand, global economic inequality is partly the result of historical processes, colonialism, unfair trade agreements, resource extraction. On the other hand, some countries are poor partly because of their own governance failures.
So maybe the responsibility varies case by case?
Perhaps. But here's another way to think about it. Instead of asking whether rich countries have obligations to poor people, ask whether the current system is actually good for rich countries.
How do you mean?
Well, immigration restrictions are expensive to maintain. The US spends more on border enforcement than on the FBI, DEA, and ATF combined. Meanwhile, studies consistently show that immigration, even large-scale immigration, tends to boost economic growth in receiving countries.
Really? I thought immigrants competed with native workers for jobs.
That's the intuitive assumption, but the evidence suggests it's mostly wrong. Immigrants often take jobs that complement, rather than compete with native workers. They also create new businesses at higher rates than natives, which creates jobs for everyone.
Why do so many people believe immigration hurts the economy then?
Partly because the benefits are diffuse while the costs are concentrated. If a factory closes because of global competition, the workers see their jobs disappearing. But they don't see the new jobs being created in other sectors by immigrant entrepreneurs.
So it's a perception problem?
Partly, but not entirely. Even if immigration helps the economy overall, some individuals do get hurt. A construction worker might face wage competition from immigrant workers, even if the broader economy benefits.
So we're back to winners and losers.
Yes, but here's where policy design matters. You could have open immigration combined with stronger safety nets for displaced workers, retraining programs, and policies that ensure the benefits of growth are more widely shared.
That sounds expensive.
It is, but remember, immigration typically generates more tax revenue than immigrants consume in services. So you could fund those programs with the additional revenue from a larger, more productive economy.
Assuming the politics work out.
And there's the rub. The economics of immigration are generally positive. but the politics are incredibly difficult. People's fears about cultural change, their tribal instincts, their concerns about fairness, these often override economic arguments.
So even if open borders would make everyone better off economically, it might not be politically feasible?
Exactly. Which brings us back to the question of how change happens. Maybe instead of pushing for dramatic border liberalization, we should focus on smaller changes that help people experience the benefits of diversity and global connection.
Like what?
Student exchange programs, sister city relationships, international business partnerships, cultural festivals. When people have positive personal experiences with others, they become more open to policy changes.
That's slower than dramatic reform, but maybe more sustainable?
Possibly. Think about how attitudes towards same-sex marriage changed in the US. It wasn't primarily through abstract arguments about rights, but through people getting to know gay friends and family members.
So familiarity breeds acceptance rather than contempt?
Often, yes. Although it has to be the right kind of familiarity, contact between equals working toward common goals, rather than competitive or hierarchical relationships.
Boss, let me shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about voluntary migration, but what about forced migration? Climate refugees, people fleeing war or persecution?
That's where I think the moral case for border flexibility becomes strongest. When people are fleeing for their lives, turning them away violates basic human dignity. The 1951 Refugee Convention recognizes this principle, though it's honored more in the breach than in practice.
Why don't countries follow their own refugee laws better?
Several reasons. First, the current refugee system was designed for a different era. It was meant to handle Europeans displaced by World War II, not global climate migration or failed states. Second, the definition of refugee is quite narrow. It doesn't cover people fleeing poverty, climate change, or generalized violence.
So the system is outdated?
Very much so. We need new international frameworks for new kinds of displacement, but that requires countries to agree on new rules, which is difficult when many are in a nationalist mood.
What would a modern refugee system look like?
It might include climate migration, might have more burden sharing between countries, might emphasize temporary protection with the possibility of return when conditions improve. It might also focus more on addressing root causes of displacement.
That sounds sensible. Why isn't it happening?
Because it requires countries to give up some sovereignty over their border policies, and to commit resources to global problems. In an era of rising nationalism, that's a hard sell politically.
So we're stuck with an inadequate system because of politics?
For now, yes. But crisis often drives change. As climate displacement increases, as migration pressures grow, countries may find that cooperation serves their interests better than going it alone.
Boss, you mentioned climate change several times. How much will that change migration patterns?
Dramatically. The World Bank estimates we could see 200 million climate migrants by 2050, people displaced by sea level rise, drought, extreme weather, and ecosystem collapse. That's roughly the entire population of Brazil.
That's terrifying. Where will all those people go?
Most will probably move within their own countries first, from rural to urban areas, from coastal to inland areas. But some regions will become largely uninhabitable, forcing international migration.
Like entire countries disappearing underwater?
Small island nations like Tuvalu and the Maldives, yes, but also parts of Bangladesh, southern Florida, coastal cities worldwide. Plus, increasing areas becoming too hot for human habitation, or too dry for agriculture.
This makes our conversation about borders seem much more urgent.
Exactly, climate change isn't waiting for us to figure out better migration policies. We're going to have massive population movements whether we plan for them or not. The question is, whether we manage them humanely and effectively, or whether we let them create chaos and conflict.
What would good planning look like?
International agreements about responsibility sharing, infrastructure investments in likely destination areas, programs to help people adapt in place where possible, and legal pathways for migration before crisis hits.
Basically the opposite of what we're doing now?
Largely, yes. Right now we're mostly building walls and hoping the problem goes away. That's like trying to stop a flood by building higher levees instead of managing the watershed.
But boss, let's be realistic. Even if leaders wanted to plan for climate migration, would voters support it? People seem to want less immigration, not more.
That's the trillion-dollar question, Claire. How do you build public support for accepting millions of climate migrants when many people are already anxious about current migration levels?
I honestly don't know. It seems almost impossible.
It might be, with current approaches. But what if we change the narrative? Instead of talking about migration as a burden, what if we talked about it as an opportunity?
How is massive migration an opportunity?
Well, many developed countries have aging populations and shrinking workforces. They need young workers to support their economies and social systems. Climate migrants tend to be young and motivated, exactly what these countries need economically.
So it's potentially a match between countries that need workers and people who need homes.
Exactly. Plus, historically, some of the most innovative and dynamic places have been migration destinations. Cities like New York, London, Singapore, their energy comes partly from bringing together people from different backgrounds.
That requires the right kind of integration, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Just throwing people together doesn't automatically create harmony. You need language programs, job training, cultural orientation, community building efforts. Integration has to be intentional and well supported.
And expensive.
Initially, yes, but the long-term economic benefits typically far outweigh the short-term costs. The challenge is getting people to think long-term when they're anxious about immediate changes.
Boss, this makes me think about something else. We've been talking about migration, as if it's always from poor countries to rich countries. But what if climate change scrambles that pattern?
Fascinating point. You're right. Climate impacts don't respect current economic boundaries. Parts of currently rich countries might become uninhabitable, while parts of currently poor countries remain viable.
Like how parts of the American Southwest might become too hot and dry, while parts of Siberia might become more temperate.
Exactly. We might see Americans migrating to Canada, Europeans migrating to Scandinavia, or even wealthy climate refugees moving to currently poorer but climatically stable regions.
That would really scramble our assumptions about migration.
It would indeed. And it might make migration politics very different if it's not just poor people seeking to enter rich countries, but also rich people needing to leave climate-impacted areas.
Sudden solidarity when everyone's in the same boat?
Possibly, though it might also create new forms of competition and conflict. Climate-stable regions might become very selective about who they accept, leading to new forms of inequality.
Like climate apartheid?
That's a term some researchers actually use. The worry is that wealthy people will retreat to climate-controlled enclaves while leaving everyone else to face the consequences of environmental collapse.
That sounds like a dystopian future.
It could be, but it's not inevitable. We still have choices about how to respond to these challenges. That's why conversations like this one matter. They help us imagine different possibilities.
Speaking of different possibilities, boss, let me ask about something we touched on earlier. You mentioned digital citizenship and virtual nations. Could those actually provide alternatives to physical migration?
That's a brilliant question. If people can work remotely, access services digitally, and participate in communities virtually, maybe they won't need to move physically to access opportunities.
So instead of moving to Silicon Valley to work in tech, you could stay in your hometown but be a digital citizen of a global tech community?
Exactly. The pandemic showed us that many jobs can be done from anywhere. If that trend continues, it might reduce some economic pressures for migration.
But what about people fleeing violence or climate disasters? Virtual citizenship won't protect them from hurricanes or wars.
True, virtual citizenship isn't a complete solution, but it might be part of a broader toolkit. For example, if people can earn decent livings remotely, they might be less likely to migrate for purely economic reasons, leaving more resources for helping those who must migrate for safety reasons.
And it might make receiving communities more open to migrants if there's less economic competition?
Possibly. Plus, if people have experience with virtual global communities, they might be more comfortable with the idea of global citizenship and international cooperation.
But boss, doesn't virtual connection also enable isolation and extremism? Echo chambers and conspiracy theories?
Unfortunately, yes, the same technologies that can connect diverse people can also allow like-minded people to reinforce each other's biases. Virtual communities can become virtual tribes just as closed-minded as physical ones.
So technology isn't automatically progressive?
Not at all. Technology amplifies human tendencies, both good and bad. The internet enables both global collaboration and global hate movements, both educational access and misinformation spread.
How do we get more of the good and less of the bad?
That's largely a design question. How do we structure virtual spaces to encourage curiosity, rather than confirmation bias? How do we reward bridge building rather than wall building?
Are there good examples of that working?
Some online communities do manage to maintain high-quality discourse across differences, certain academic forums, some professional networks, well-moderated discussion spaces. But it requires intentional effort and good leadership.
Like real-world communities.
Exactly. Whether physical or virtual, healthy communities don't happen by accident. They require shared norms, good governance, and people committed to making them work.
Boss, this brings me back to something that's been bothering me throughout our conversation. All these possibilities we've discussed: flexible borders, digital citizenship, climate migration planning, international cooperation, they all seem to require wise, far-sighted leadership. But what if we don't get that kind of leadership?
That's the scenario that keeps me awake at night, Claire. History shows that when faced with complex challenges requiring cooperation, humans sometimes choose cooperation and sometimes choose conflict. The outcome isn't predetermined.
What determines which way it goes?
Many factors: economic conditions, cultural narratives, institutional strength, leadership quality, external shocks. But here's what gives me hope. Ordinary people like yourself thinking seriously about these issues.
But I'm just one person. What can I possibly do about global migration and climate change and international cooperation?
Remember what we said about tribal psychology. Your influence radiates outward through your social networks. Every conversation you have about these topics influences someone else's thinking. Every vote you cast, every organization you support, every relationship you build across difference, it all adds up.
Like the butterfly effect?
Something like that. Social change often happens through cascading influences rather than top-down decisions. Someone has a conversation that changes how they think, which influences how they vote, which affects policy, which shapes institutions, which changes possibilities for future generations.
So this conversation tonight might actually matter?
I believe it does, Claire, not because you'll single-handedly solve global migration, but because you'll approach these issues differently now. And that will influence how you interact with others, which influences how they think, and so on.
That's both inspiring and overwhelming.
Focus on the inspiring part. You get to be part of writing the next chapter of human civilization. Not many generations get to participate in such fundamental questions about how we organize ourselves as a species.
When you put it that way, it does feel pretty significant.
And remember, you're not doing it alone. Around the world, millions of people are having similar conversations, asking similar questions, working on pieces of these puzzles. You're part of a global community of people who care about building something better.
A borderless community working on border questions?
I love that. Yes, a global tribe dedicated to expanding the possibilities for all tribes. People connected across all the traditional boundaries, national, cultural, ideological, by their shared commitment to human flourishing.
Boss, I want to ask you something personal before we finish. After all these years of thinking about these issues, do you feel hopeful or pessimistic about the future?
Honestly, both. I'm pessimistic about our ability to avoid some pretty serious crises in the coming decades. Climate displacement, economic disruption, political upheaval. I think we're in for a rough ride.
That's not very comforting.
But here's why I'm also hopeful. Crisis often brings out the best in people as well as the worst. It forces innovation, cooperation, and creative problem-solving. Some of humanity's greatest achievements have come in response to existential challenges.
Like how World War II led to the United Nations.
Exactly, or how the threat of nuclear war led to arms control agreements, or how the ozone hole led to the Montreal Protocol. Humans are remarkably good at cooperating when they really need to.
So maybe the climate crisis will force the kind of global cooperation that seemed impossible before?
It might. And maybe the migration pressures will force us to develop more humane and effective approaches to borders and citizenship. Necessity is often the mother of innovation.
But there's no guarantee it will work out well.
No, there isn't. which is why the work you and others do to shape how we think about these issues is so important. The stories we tell about what's possible influence what actually becomes possible.
So if enough people can imagine better solutions, those solutions become more likely?
I think so. Social reality is partly constructed through shared imagination. If everyone assumes borders must be rigid and zero-sum, they'll remain that way. But if enough people can envision flexible, positive-sum approaches, those become possible.
That's a lot of responsibility for imaginative conversations.
But also a lot of power. Every conversation that expands someone's sense of what's possible is a small victory for the future you want to see.
Boss, as we're wrapping up, I want to ask, what's the most important thing you hope I remember from our conversation tonight?
That the world as it is isn't the world as it must be. Borders, nations, citizenship, belonging. These are all human inventions, and humans can reinvent them when they need to.
And that change is possible even when it seems impossible?
Yes, but also that change requires both vision and patience. The most important transformations happen gradually, through countless small shifts in how people think and act.
So I should dream big but start small?
Perfect summary. Dream of a world where borders serve human flourishing rather than constraining it, but start by building bridges in your own community.
What kind of bridges?
Any kind. Learn a new language. Befriend someone from a different background. Support organizations working on global issues. Travel with curiosity rather than judgment. Vote for leaders who think beyond national boundaries.
Those seem so small compared to the size of the problems.
But remember, every person who has ever changed the world started with small actions. Martin Luther King Jr. started with a bus boycott in one city. Gandhi started with a salt march. You start where you are, with what you have.
And trust that it will add up to something bigger?
Trust that it might, and that even if it doesn't, you'll have lived according to your values. That's not nothing, Claire. That's everything.
Boss, this has been the most thought-provoking conversation I've had in years. Thank you for helping me think through these massive questions.
Thank you for bringing such curiosity and thoughtfulness to them. Conversations like this give me hope for the future. If young people like you are thinking this deeply about these issues, maybe we'll figure out how to navigate them wisely.
I hope so too. And I hope someday I can have this conversation with someone else and help them think through these questions, the way you've helped me.
I'm sure you will, Claire. And when you do, you'll add your own insights and perspectives to the mix. That's how human knowledge grows, through countless conversations across countless boundaries.
Here's to building bridges, crossing boundaries, and expanding our sense of what's possible.
And here's to the courage to keep asking the big questions, even when we don't know the answers. The questions themselves are often more important than the answers.
Thank you, boss, for the conversation, for the perspective, and for the reminder that the future isn't written yet.
Thank you, Claire. Now go out there and help write it well.
Oh, well, it's getting late. I suppose it's time for me to head home. Oh no. I forgot my wallet again. What a blunder. Excuse me, you over there? Yes, you. I'm terribly sorry. I actually left my wallet at home. I know this is a lot to ask, but would you mind covering my ginger ale? Is it okay? You've been listening to our conversation for a while now, haven't you? I know you have. Did you enjoy it? If you found it even a little helpful, please, you can support me via the QR code at the bottom right of the video or through the link in the description. Thank you so much for your kindness. I really appreciate your support. If you'd like, please also subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment. Also, please take a look at the other channels from the link in the description. All right then, I'm heading home now. Thank you so much.